Now then, you're very welcome back. So Joe Molloy here. We are reviewing the Sunday papers as we usually do around this time, and I'm delighted to say we're joined by Brian Kerr and Ryle Nugent, who need no introduction, although latterly they are commentating on the Heineken Champions Cup for BT Sport, and we'll be doing the Six Nations for the World Feed, and the other is crying tears of joy whenever Spurs win big games in the Champions League on a Virgin TV station near you. Hello, Brian Kerr, how are you?
Yeah, very good, Joe, very good.
I'm often talking to you down a line when you're at a Premier League game, and now you're stuck in studio. This is the high life in here.
Yeah, and I've no big cans in my ears or anything to block out the noise of the crowd, although there's no crowd in here. A lot of jerseys, empty jerseys and whatever else. But there you go. Yeah, that's a nicer Sunday, going to matches and the excitement before the game. And sure, Ryle would agree with me on that one. The tension before the match, hoping that the match is good, but also that your involvement in it helps people to enjoy listening to it. Or watching it. In his case, they're watching. My case,
it certainly does. Certainly does. I'm going to run people through the front pages, or the back pages rather, firstly, and then we'll get stuck into things. So Kerry stand firm. Obviously the game last night at Croke Park looming large on all the back pages, and the picture here is of David Clifford having his jersey yanked off, as happened towards the end last night. Kingdom lay down marker for years. Clifford frustrates dubs, 119 apiece, really good first half in particular. Another story that we'll come to in the Mail here is League of Ireland start in doubt as 40% of refs fail fitness test. Come to that in one moment. We have the Sunday Independent here again. It's Dublin and Kerry. It's thank God for Dublin and Kerry, which is probably really how a lot of GAA fans feel in the main. If we could get these two playing a bit more often, it would be no bad thing. Old rivals serve up a thrilling draw. And they have Colm O'Rourke writing about it here beneath on the Sunday Independent. Mauricio Pochettino is on the back page of the Mirror. Ole gets more time. Poch's Spurs compo gives Solskjaer breathing space. So it would seem that Pochettino's exit package will certainly give Solskjaer a bit more time. If he gets another job before the end of the season, Pochettino that is, then Spurs are entitled to £10 million compensation, which might just make Manchester United think twice if they were thinking that way. Back page of the Star. This is in a few places. A deal with Saudis is on for £340 million. Mike Ashley is talking to the Saudi Arabia Sovereign Wealth Fund, and it would seem that he likes the sound of 340 million.
Say so when I talk to them for 340 million.
Sun Sport. £500 million, reckons Sun Sport. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is driving a £340 million Newcastle takeover bid. So I wonder where the extra £500 million is coming from. Oh, Amanda Stavely are also willing to invest £200 million, so it's a £500 million deal. Either way, there's a picture of Mike Ashley smiling if you're listening on the radio. And then down in Shirty, a picture of David Clifford and his shirt hanging off him. Pretty good picture, it must be said. And it's David denies dubs at the death. And then Sunday Times, picture of Tommy Walsh for Kerry in action with Kieran Kilkenny straining to get to him last night at Croke Park. Level best, Dublin and Kerry battle to draw Croke Park. Over here in the Sunday Times, new FAI chief, we must get out of dark tunnel. That's Jerry McEnany, who was voted in yesterday, and quite clearly they do need to get out of a dark tunnel. And then an interesting one here, Sarries in talks to host top test nations. Obviously Saracens to be relegated next year. So Saracens have held talks about signing matches against international sides next season when they play in the Green King IPA Championship. The Sunday Times understands that South Africa are interested, that the Babas are being lined up, they're attempting to, and this is all in a bid to give them top-level matches next year. I mean,
your cynicism doesn't know where to begin.
It's just ridiculous, isn't it? So, there we are. Dublin-Kerry last night. That's on all the back pages, so that's probably the jumping-off point for the papers today. Colm O'Rourke generally joins the chorus of people here, saying how it was a thrilling game in particular. Kerry making a mark, but Dublin going nowhere fast. David Clarke was all darting runs, dummies and menace. He scored a brilliant goal when most would have gone for a point. Brian Fenton, imperious, 4.5 points as he strolled around. Talked about James O'Donoghue being very lively and accurate, and then said the referee managed to make a right dog's dinner of what was a great game. Phantom frees, colour cards, sending offs, and each card took an eternity. There should have been another half hour of extra time. Why was David Goff not referee in this game? Some of the sentiments of O'Rourke there. Did you watch it?
Yes. Yeah, I watched it, yeah. It was a great match, Joe. It was a great match. Sometimes I can watch a Gaelic match and I can read a paper at the same time and not not miss too much. Look up when you get the crowd get noisier. But I was very interested in the game last night because of the end of the All Ireland and the draw match, and Dublin beating them. Just to see how it was with Desi Farrell. I was actually at Jim Gavin's conferring of the freedom of the city last weekend, not too far from here, and there was a sense at that occasion that it was the end of that era, and there was no sign of Desi Farrell that night, but everybody knew that was what was going to be happening next week. So I was interested in the game. I thought the game was very good. I thought Dublin lost their discipline at crucial times in the game, and it cost them in the match. There were the black card thing where it's now a 10-minute sin bin, which seems a lot fairer than just putting a player off. But it still had an impact on the game because Kerry got scores when Dublin were down to 14, and then Kerry had a player off in the sin bin as well, and Dublin got scores, vital scores, towards the end of the game. But Dublin's discipline, Eric Lowndes was in trouble twice, ended up getting a red card because he got 2 black cards. And then right at the end of the match, when they got ahead, Dublin, they had the point lead, They did stupid things, I thought, off the Kerry kick out, gave away frees, and then the free was moved forward because John Small came in and far too aggressively to deal with the situation, and the referee moved the ball forward 15 yards and made it very easy for Kerry to get an equaliser. But it was a good game. It was interesting, the whole mark discussion before the match, and yet it had very little influence on the match. I think Colin makes some reference to that about it being there, but not having. And I say the mark did as was expected. It may not have been used much, but it disrupts the flow of the game. But the team scored. What I saw of the mark, I think there was three times in the match.
There was one very dramatic one where you could see, that's quite an exciting moment when Kieran Kilkenny, surrounded by players, caught it and the arm went up in the air, and you thought, okay, that maybe deserves to be rewarded. But the little pop passes into a chest and the ball caught.
So it was, I think it was Michael Murphy, wasn't it? Earlier today was going around social media which was ostensibly a 15-foot kick from one side to the other, and it was look, I think it's really easy for people to jump all over a rule change or potential rule change in week one and say it should or shouldn't be there. It's the saviour or it's the killer of the game. I think you got to give it a period of time and make a decision based on evidence over 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks rather than the first weekend. There were, as you say, that Kilkenny one was a really good reason to reward the skill of what he showed. The Murphy one for Donegal, you kind of go, that's going to kill a game, or it's going to decide a game in a way that will feel absolutely unsatisfactory at some point during the season.
Yeah.
So wait would be my sense on that one. I think a couple of things to say about it is, firstly, good on the papers being able to get that volume in this morning on what was a really late finish last night. So they've done unbelievably well to turn around the level of coverage that they have. And it was great that it was a belter of a game to start in a clear patch for the league. Sometimes they start the same weekend as the Six Nations and they can get lost in it. It was a clear field last night. It was a
You're
nice
very
night.
aware of that, Royal.
40,000 people at it, and it was a really good spectacle and everything that you'd want from your first weekend of the league. I mean, Roy Kirsch's in the Sunday World's opening paragraph, like twin uncontainable wildfires, David Clifford and Brian Fenton engulf Croke Park, the lawless inferno of their genius bringing a glorious summer sizzle to midwinter. A little bit poetic, but nonetheless the sentiment is right. It was, and watching Fenton and Clifford, like, it's magnificent to watch. Yeah, and they are for me, and I think for everybody, the two players that you want to see week in, week out.
Yeah.
And for them to hit their straps in week one, in January. It's January, lads.
I really wonder what we have in our hands here with Clifford. We've
Well,
got
I'd say
something
the same
very
about
special.
Fenton. You know, like
Oh, no, Fenton's extraordinary.
Yeah,
but
but Fenton's out in the middle of the pitch and he catches balls and,
Sure.
and runs forward and scores points and he's very calm.
Catches balls.
No,
What have you done for me lately,
but he's
though?
calm. He's calm. And so, where Clifford is playing though,
Yes.
when you're in there and you're stuck in there, and you can't control the amount of possession you're going to receive from. Your team has to have a bit of possession. Your midfield have to be in the game. But when it comes into you, it's not too often it comes in, and you have to do it. You've got to come up with the good.
Oh.
The goal he scored was just sensational goal. I mean, you read out the description of it. The skill and the movement was mesmerising. David Clifford was all darting runs, dummies and menace. He scored a brilliant goal when most would have been happy with a point. It was a brilliant goal. Now, just on the goalkeeping side, and that was interesting that Evan Comfort was playing last night. There was no Stephen Cluxton, and in the build-up the game on TV last night, the punditry was, the view was that he was a replica of Stephen Cluxton, and that he looks like him and he moves like him, he stands like him, and the whole lot. But he didn't make saves like him last night, and he didn't distribute the ball well enough like him. There was a couple of kickouts that went, let's say, astray, or it went to a Kerry player and they conceded points. So, you know, you've got to do it. You play him, and Stephen Cluxton is recovering from injury, but it's early yet. But, you know, it'll be different when Cluxton, when that day comes that he doesn't play, because he's been sensational. And he's been a better goalkeeper in the last few years. Not just about the distribution, but as regards making saves and his position and his handling and so on. So it's... you know what? It's got to whether it was Fenton or Clifford, and Clifford is just magnificent to watch, and you wonder whether the captaincy might be a bit, and is it too much on young shoulders too early, and
second season syndrome and different things like that.
And every time the guy gets asked a question, he doesn't just answer it; like, he emphatically answers it, and it's spectacular. But what's great, whether it's Fenton or Clifford, you know, we're at a point in this season of sport where you feel, whether it's the Dubs and Kerry, or whether it's Liverpool, or whether it's Leinster, there are teams that you just don't want to miss performing on a week-in, week-out basis, because you feel like you're going to miss something special. And Dublin and Kerry are entering that. Dublin have been in it, but the rivalry with Kerry now is something you just don't want to miss, and it was great to have a clear pitch. And I think you've got to remember the context of it being the last weekend, or the second last weekend in January, and guys are coming back from layoffs and a little bit of downtime, which they richly deserve, and yet the standard was
very high,
what it was last night, and it was an absolute joy to watch. Second half, probably scrappier. But then the last few minutes, it looked like Kerry were getting away at one stage. They got 3 points up. Looked if they got the next point, but then Dublin came back. But I think the black card situation and the discipline had an impact on the game, because Dublin came back in when Kerry got a black card.
And then it was kind of funny at the end. Like, Clifford is made of the right stuff mentally as well, because during the week Peter Keynes was asked about the captaincy, and he said, look, everything rests very lightly on this guy's shoulders. It's not going to be a problem. And then even at the end, pops the free over,
which was no easy free.
It wasn't easy.
But he can only be the captain because of
his club.
His club. No. But if the manager has an impact on the decision, if Keane has an impact on the decision, is that it? Like, because his club win the championship, is it still that one?
Yeah.
So if they have any other player in it.
Oh, he won't be captain next year unless they win it again.
No, but like, the logic of that in the GAA has always baffled me. You know, because now you've got the full forward as the captain of the team, where everyone back to it. Now, like, it's a bit like having the striker as the captain of the team, and you know, it's Maradona or Cruyff, whatever he is, and he's the captain of the team, and everyone knows he's the best player, and he'll pull the game out of the bag when you need him to. But there's a gang of fellas further back in the pitch who are much more influential in the
general flow.
The general flow, and also the organisation and the responsibility expected from other players in the pitch. The goalkeeper one was one. I never liked the goalkeeper as the captain in soccer teams. I always thought he was too far away from the middle of the pitch to influence, like centre halves.
You had Kenny.
Yeah, but I've had loads of captains
But I'm
over
just
the
asking,
years.
Ireland,
with
you had
different
Kenny with
teams.
Ireland, didn't you?
Yeah.
You like a centre
Matty
half?
Holland at
Matty
times
Holland.
as well, you know. But I like centre halves. Or I like midfield players because I think they can touch other players in the pitch and say, will a full forward in Gaelic have any influence? Or maybe it doesn't matter so much in Gaelic, but I would have thought there are times in the game when the troops need to be rallied and the manager can't do too much about it because he's out. And somebody within the team needs to be, say, the Paddy O'Shea-like figure for Kerry or whatever, that can go, or Brian Mullins or something, and he can get on top of it.
Well, here's an interesting counterpoint to you then, because two of the counties I
don't need the counterpoint.
I'm giving you a
I'm
counterpoint.
just giving.
No,
I'm
let me
giving
give it to you. Let me put this to you.
About a game that I only know a half a bit about.
Let me put
Anyway,
this to
go
you.
on.
Two of the counties I would most associate with this strange system of the club dictating the captain are Kerry football and Kilkenny hurling. So I wonder, actually, does that almost diminish the importance of the captain in a good way? It forces a natural cohort of leaders to step up, because there'll be certain years where there's a fella who mightn't be a natural leader has to be captain. So actually, it takes the emphasis off Roy Keane in the middle. Come on, lads.
I think that's a very good theory, Joe, and obviously works. And I mean, you know, in the Kilkenny situation, I'm sure there's leaders all throughout the team, and fellas emerge and
step up.
Yeah, so it's maybe it's that role is not that important anymore in modern sport, but I still like the idea of somebody who has the role, who can influence other fellas to perform a little better and who can cajole a bit more and represent them well. If there's negotiation stuff going on in the background, maybe in the GAA there's no negotiations now, you're just told where you go.
I think so. And then at the end he had his shirt yanked off him. John Small again was in there, and you could tell when he knew he almost had it, and he gave it one last good hoik. But Clifford wasn't rattled by that, it seems.
No, he wasn't, and
more than happy to get him going.
Look, it was great, and all the papers have super coverage with Michael Foley in the Sunday Times. It all unfolded last night. It doesn't matter, at least it shouldn't matter in a chill of January, a million light years from the wild heat of Dublin and Kerry's next encounter, but it still does. In a superpower race of reducing margins, all this stuff does.
Yeah.
And you felt that actually, that Clifford point at the end, that free to get the draw, it was because before that, in the 5-6 minutes before that, Dublin and Fenton had been in the middle and the arm had gone up, whatever that signal is.
Yeah.
There's a line in one of the papers about that signal.
Because we saw it in the All-Ireland final.
Correct. Where is it gone? It has just slipped away from me. Darn it! But it is everybody trying to interpret what that means. And Dublin had worked it from one side and found the way of getting the score. And you felt if they had gone on to win that, maybe it was another small scar for Kerry to try and heal. But that point at the end, everybody walks away, and there's I guess still a pep in everybody's step based on the performance and what lies ahead over the next couple of weeks.
I think there should be some sympathy for the referee. I know Colin O'Rourke gave him a bit of a kick in there in relation to decisions and the cards and the frees, phantom frees and so on. But I tell you what, it's one hard gig now refereeing the Gaelic match, isn't it?
It's one hard gig refereeing anything.
Any sport, but at least in rugby,
it's concern.
At least in rugby, there's respected refereeing decisions, and people can don't dispute them within the game too much. The captain can have a word. But Gaelic football, with the size of the pitch and the transfer of the ball and the speed the ball can be moved at these times, the speed of the players, the fitness conditioning of the players now has changed, and it's a really, really extraordinarily tough job. And the more little add-ons they make to the rules, like the referee has to make the judgment on whether the ball has travelled 20 and whether he's inside the line, and oh God, that's getting even more and more complicated. Just as rugby rules are very, very complicated, soccer rules have become less complicated because the VAR makes a decision. Now, the referee doesn't need to make a decision in the match at all. He can just wait and VAR. But in rugby, you know, the technicalities of the offside and this. Anyway, but there, I'm just giving a little bit of sympathy for the ref because I'm saying that was a hard gig. But David Goff been on the line. But I think they need to get to 4th and 5th officials now, the way it's gone.
One last point before we get into all the Six Nations previews, which are across the papers. You mentioned Jim Gavin there. Did you know him well? Can you give us any sense of the man, or what was your relationship with him?
I didn't know him well, but I had a few discussions with him about.
Come on.
Well, on the goalkeeping coach, I mean, I told the story last week. Jim was there. Jim rang me a few years ago and said, look, I'd met him at a couple of different dinners. I was aware he played a bit of soccer up in Moyle Park, and I played the Defence Forces soccer team, and I knew he had a bit of a love for it as well as the GAA. But anyway, he rang me in and said, look, I need a goalkeeping coach. You know, when I was quite aware of Stephen Cluxton, at that time I think he'd only 4 senior All-Ireland, and I'm thinking, does he want a goalkeeping coach as the conversation is going on? Does he want someone to work with the young goalkeepers coming in? And I gathered, no, he was looking for a goal. So I'm thinking, right, you're going to need someone here who's a bit different to work with Stephen Cluxton, and Stephen Cluxton has been revolutionising the game in terms of the value of the kick out, the responsibility, and joining in with the back line to be part of the build-up play. And so anyway, I was able to kind of come up with something, and I recommended someone for him, but I also understood that it wasn't going to be an easy one, given the quality of the staff that he had behind him already. And fortunately it worked out. I recommended a lad called Josh Moran, who was a very good League of Ireland goalkeeper in his time, who worked with lots of international goalkeepers, but also he still continues to work with one of the underage international teams. And I think it's worked out reasonably well. Other than that, he's rang me looking, he wanted to talk tactics to me one time, to try and meet him, to have talk some tactical stuff. But I said, look, I find it difficult enough to be clear about watching 11 and 11-a-side matches on a pitch that's about 40% smaller than the pitch you play on, and you want me to talk about the 15 and the movement of 15 against 15, and you have 10 subs. I said, I don't think I could add a lot to it. But we had a bit of a laugh and a bit of a joke, and he also asked me about going to watch clubs at a high level in England as well. So it just shows you how his mind worked, how his openness to other sports and other games. And I know he studies basketball.
What clubs did he go and watch?
Well, he wanted to go and see, like, he was making it easy for me. He wanted me to get him into Liverpool last year when it wasn't going particularly well for Liverpool. They were just trying to win the Champions League at the time. And
did you ring up Jurgen on his behalf?
I rang Richie Partridge, and who works as a physio there, and I asked Richie, and it almost worked out, but it didn't quite in the end. But it just shows you the extent. And look, most people are like that in sport. They look at other sports and coaches and trying to get a bit of an edge and learn a bit from something else.
Hey, you're very welcome back. We're covering the Sunday papers with Ryle Nugent and Brian Kerr. We've just been talking Dublin-Kerry last night in the GAA. Six Nations is upon us this time next week, give or take an hour or two. We'll have round one done and dusted. There are, as you can imagine, lots of pieces previewing the tournament. We have Charlie Morgan in the Sunday Independent. We have Ian McGeechan's verdict on what's going to happen. We have Brendan Fanning. We have Neil Francis writing about the future for the tournament and the sale of a significant stake of the tournament to CVC. We have Shane McGrath on Andy Farrell. We have Peter O'Reilly on Andy Farrell. There's a Mike Catt profile piece in the Mail on Sunday. There's a Fabien Galtier piece in the Mail on Sunday. There's a Sunday Business Post piece on Andy Farrell, what he has to do, and plenty more besides. Eamon Sweeney on the back page. Everywhere, all the papers have pieces. So there's lots to get to. We won't get to all of it. We got a glimpse of Brian Kerr, the GAA man, there a moment ago. Brian Kerr, the rugby man. Do you like it? Do you watch it?
I'm happy sitting here with Ryle, and he'll fill in the next 15 minutes talking about rugby. But
you watch it at all?
Nonetheless, I do actually. Yeah. But nonetheless,
are you a Leinster fan?
My commitment to this particular role today, I've read several enjoyable pieces. Am I a Leinster fan? No, I'm not a Leinster fan. I enjoy watching the matches when they're on, but I don't go out of my way to watch them. I much prefer watching the underdogs and Connacht as often as I can.
So you're more of a Connacht fan than a Leinster fan?
I am, yeah, because I've always been consistent in my life in liking the underdog and whatever the sport is. And Connacht are my team in rugby. And I enjoyed it massively when they won. I think it was the Pro 12 then, wasn't it? Now it's for Pro 14. But I enjoyed that thoroughly. It was great, you know, given that a few years before they were marching on Lansdowne Road trying to stay alive.
And is it these...
when the IRFU,
We're almost shut them down.
wanted to close them down. So I think that was a great story.
Is it these private schools outsiders you don't like? Is that the story?
No, it's more with the people that kind of took up following Leinster in recent years when they started winning by substantial. Like, I used to go to Leinster and Munster when I was a kid, when there was 200 or 300 at the match in Donnybrook. You know, I was a regular into provincial matches when nobody else went. I used to go regularly to the colours match with Trinity and UCD as well. And
watch nothing if not a contradiction.
Watch the students throwing flour at each other and stuff like that.
Every time you start to talk on something like you come up with contradictions that no one ever expected.
No, but I saw the change and look, I admire it, and I think it's fabulous that the four provinces are so strong. You know, and I go back to my earlier arguments a few years ago that I used to have with George Hook about the fact that it was all uneven in the European Cup, that our teams were amalgamations of a load of clubs playing against individual clubs. We have clubs like Ulster, Leinster, Munster and Connacht who are not really a club. They are a province who represent a gang of clubs, but they can pick one team to play against what are individual clubs in other countries. Now, I kind of thought that was fairly mad, but interesting, and allowed us to be winning. And that's what's happened. We've been good at winning in the European sense in rugby and in club rugby. So, you know, people like going to see winners and enjoy the fact that we are competitive and we can win on a regular basis. And they've joined, you know, the crowds going to Friday night to RDS or Saturday, whenever the matches are, by their thousands, and they've generated a whole new thing in sport around the Leinster, Dublin area, I'd say in particular, which wasn't there. So, well and good, if those people never went to sport before and they go enjoying rugby matches or they go enjoy Leinster rugby matches, good luck to them. But I'll be sticking with me Friday night at the League of Ireland in our little cult our fan club that stuck with that. But look, I admire what they do.
It's people who never went to sport before, and that was a dagger.
No, I said if they never went to sport. If they never went to sport, it's great that they go and watch sport and they bring their kids, and their kids are inspired to want to be involved in sport. I think that's all hugely.
I presume, we're going to come back to rugby. League of Ireland could learn a thing or two from the way they've made themselves such a brand.
But sure, look, that's all going to happen now.
Is that right? Yeah.
The new regime, it's all happening. No, well, look, I take an interest in it, and I watched it, and I listen to Ryle's commentaries even now, and in his new role, a different station rather. And I enjoy the games when I get a bit of time. So I'm looking forward, because I'm not working on the Saturday so often now on radio, so I'll be able to watch some of the games from next week.
Well, lots here.
There's a new cast of characters. That is what this Six Nations about.
It is. It's a new cast of characters in terms of the Six Nations, and it's particularly the cast of characters that's taken over for the national team, and I guess every single one of the papers has either touched on that or has made it a significant part of their preview coverage, and really it comes down to Andy Farrell and the headline in the Sunday Indo, "Let's see what Farrell is made of," probably sums up just about everything that's written in all the papers today, and it's Eamon Sweeney's piece. "When Farrell was appointed, it must have seemed a dream job, yet he's going to be under more pressure than initially envisaged. Not you're getting sacked in the morning if we don't win the Grand Slam type pressure, but pressure nonetheless. He was, after all, the second in command during last year's disaster." And then it goes on, and all the papers pick up the same theme. So which route will Farrell take? Well, the signals are conflicting, continues Eamon Sweeney. His inclusion of the likes of Max Deegan, Caelan Doris, Jack O'Donoghue, Ronan Kelleher, at the exclusion of Rob Kearney, Rhys Ruddock and Geordie Murphy, seems to privilege potential over experience. But then the selection of Johnny Sexton as captain instead of someone like James Ryan indicates a more conservative bent. Peter O'Reilly in the Sunday Times picks it up by saying, so this is Farrell's choice, a resurgent Murray at maybe 90% capacity at scrum half or Cooney at his best. The public choice by a mile. For the purpose of simplicity, we'll make it clear it's a case of either or, despite Luke McGrath's excellence in Treviso. And all the papers kind of hanging on this, or all the opinion pieces here sort of hanging on Andy Farrell's next and first team selection next Tuesday, and really around that scrum half position as a signal of what sort of Andy Farrell we're going to get and what sort of Ireland we're going to get. And the views are mixed. Some believing that you've got to be careful, and Brian will understand this better than anybody, you've got to be careful about throwing too many new young players in, and yet you've got to make the decisions based on form rather than on experience or pedigree in the position over the past number of years. And I guess the Murray-Cooney scrum half decision is probably the one that shines brightest in that conflict about where Farrell's going. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does. It's interesting to see him as well making the decision to go early with the team announcement. Normally it would be on a Thursday.
I think that's really interesting. I picked up on that Peter O'Reilly one, because it's always one I've had a view on about rugby or soccer, whatever the sport, naming the team early. Andy Farrell will announce his first Irish team next Tuesday lunchtime, 48 hours ahead of the deadline, the Six Nations regulations. A minor detail question mark. Not in the process-driven world of professional sports teams. For Ireland especially, it's a big change of habit, a stress reliever, and now it's have a go at Joe time. Joe Smith used to obsess about preventing opponents from knowing his team until the very last minute. Having told the squad of selection on the Monday, he would warn them to keep it themselves, away from their partners, their parents, from anyone outside the group until Thursday. This meant 72 hours of suppression of information. I think that's a very interesting piece, and it's a bit of a gung-ho attitude from the new manager, because Peter continues by saying, Farrell clearly realises it won't be the difference between winning and losing if Scotland know your team next Tuesday, who they'll be facing next Saturday. He'd prefer to avoid the stress of suppression. He'd prefer clarity. It's that's really interesting, because I was always the one as a manager who I didn't want the opposition to know the team. We had no rules. We didn't have to release the team until you're in the dressing room, an hour and a half before the match. I wouldn't generally tell the players the team until the morning of the match. Which worked fine, except I didn't always win the matches. But it 9 or 10 of the players would know they were starting anyway. It was only 1 or 2, and I like to actually.
Really,
I like to turn that one over in my mind. The final decision or two, I really like to sleep on that the night before the game, because it was so vital as far as I was concerned to get it right. And I like that. But I always find it interesting in rugby that they don't mind giving away. I always thought that Trapattoni was wrong when he was manager of Ireland naming the team early, because while it can lead to the comfort zone for the players, and he refers to it, he'd prefer to avoid the stress of suppression for the players. So this is Peter O'Reilly saying this about Andy Farrell. I used to think, why give the opposition any little lead that's going to help them to stop you tactically or deal with what you put out in front of them? Give them. It's difficult enough to do anything, to win any little margin in professional sport at the highest level. So don't give them anything that can. So I think that's interesting. So he's giving them 4 days to pick
instead of 2.
4 days instead of 2 to get there. So now one of those days is usually the captain's run. I presume not much happens on that. I don't know the workings of this sort of. I presume the day before you can do a decent bit of work. If you know the opposition's team, you might they go into some sort of tactical work in dealing with the opposition's tactics at the set pieces, I presume, and in other aspects of the play. If you're giving them 2 extra days, is that not giving them another little advantage?
It's interesting. It's kind of a leaf out of the one coach in this part of the world that has been very comfortable doing that, or at least has given the perception of being comfortable with it, is Gatland. And Gatland, he didn't always release the team early, but some weeks he actually made a point of saying, here's our 23, you can have them, you deal with it, because we know what we're doing and we're so confident and so comfortable. And of course Farrell's worked so closely with Gatland, it feels like a page out of the Gatland playbook in terms of saying, it's not like, you can overstate this. But it's just interesting to see a divergence from what has been the traditional way of doing it. I think what's going to be really interesting is whether it's Tuesday or Thursday, what sort of team he goes with in terms of that experience and new player.
Can I throw in one that I didn't know about Andy Farrell till I read Peter Riley's piece, and I thought it was interesting. This was Farrell local here, the man in touch with his Lancastrian roots, a devoted Manchester City fan. He used to follow them home and away in his teens. He's an Oasis fan too, even performed, and some might say, at his son's wedding. I thought that was interesting. Manchester City fan at that time when he was a young fella, that'd have been hard going. A lot of ups and downs about that one. So so there you go. So I like that bit. And the other interesting line in this, from my head, my soccer head. They say that nothing prepares the assistant coach for the jump to the number one role, and Farrell hasn't been allowed to ease his way in with a summer tour or a November series. It has been pointed out he could do with the president of an advisor, a sounding board for coaches and players, one of the roles the team manager used to fulfil. You'd be surprised if Farrell doesn't fill the gap. So it's interesting, a lot of the articles, and Eamon Sweeney's one is making a kind of a point. What are we getting into? We don't really know.
His last line, it could go either way for Andy Farrell. Let's see what he's made of. Hugh Farrelly's piece should be worth is worth mentioning as well. He goes on this line. The national side's routine failure at rugby's biggest tournament is well documented, but while their immediate response to World Cup disappointments gets less attention, it makes for equally grim reading. 88 last, 92 last, 96 last, 2000 third, 04 second, 08 fourth, 12 third, 2016 third. However, history does throw up a sliver, of symmetrical hope for Farrell and his squad, going back exactly 20 years to when the Five Nations became six. After the humiliation of being dumped out of by the largely amateur Argentinian side in Lens in 1999, Warren Gatlin's team opens their Six Nations account by shipping 50 points away to a rampant England. But it's what happened next that Farrelly points to. It was that Twickenham torment that hammered home the need for radical change, and Gatlin mixed it up for the visit of Scotland to Dublin, famously picking 5 new caps: O'Gara, Stringer, Horgan, Hayes and Easterby. And it's a nice look at, forget about the World Cup, look at what's happened to Six Nations after World Cups and what have Ireland learned over the years. Nice piece by Hugh Farrelly as well.
It's such an interesting appointment because when it was made and it was announced the same day as Schmidt's departure, so there was no real time for us to throw it around publicly. The strongest argument for it was this is a continuity appointment. Things have gone so well, let's try and preserve that and keep the show on the road. Fast forward a year, being a continuity appointment is the strongest argument against you right now.
Sure, and it's really interesting to watch the conversations that happen around both professional sports on this island doing pretty much the same thing. So Mick McCarthy and Kenny, Schmidt and Farrell. And everybody thought the Farrell thing was a stroke of genius, and everybody looks at the Kenny thing and asks questions about, was that a wise thing to do? Which when you look at it on paper, they pretty much did the same, made the same decision in terms of what they were saying about the future of the international team. I think Andy Farrell's under enormous pressure, and I think and I'm really interested to hear what Brian has to say on this. The difference between being and having watched it through your eyes, Brian, over the years of watching really, really strong number twos get the number one job, and the fundamental difference and the pressure that brings, and whether sometimes you're just a great number two, and that should be your role.
Well, I think, I don't accept actually what Peter O'Reilly said. They say that nothing prepares the assistant coach for the jump to the number one role, and Farrell hasn't been allowed to ease his way. They say that nothing prepares you for the change. Of course it does. Experience prepares you. Being close to the number one been very close to number one. And in his case, I think he has worked with several different guys. Peter says those of Smith, Stuart Lancaster, Warren Gatland, Martin McCall, and various other people that he's worked with. Gives you an insight how those people were. And there'll be some of them you say, I'd never want to be like him. I'd never want to say things like that to the players before the match or after match or half time. Yeah, I'd like a bit of that and I keep a bit of that. And the intelligent coaches, and he's obviously an intelligent guy, he changed from rugby league to rugby union when he was 30 and made his mind up fairly early that he was going to go into coaching. You know, I see here, Peter says, injury delayed his union career for over a year. Famously, he offers return some of his salary to Saracens. That's a gas one. Now there's a novel concept. His brief England career included an emotional day at Croke Park in 2007. Beforehand, I skipped a paragraph. Yeah. Beforehand, when Conor O'Shea briefed the England players on the historical background, he noticed that was Farrell who approached him, hungry for more information. If he was like that as a player, and he was like that as a coach, and as an assistant coach, and as a number two, I think you get a right good insight into what it's like to be the number one, and you see the pressure on the number one, and the decision making process, and the inclusivity of how some managers worked. I think Joe probably worked like that, but you know, he's obviously worked with other fellas like Gatland who would be like that, who would listen to all the defence, the backs coach, the scrum coach, the line-out coach, whatever, probably before making decisions. I think that prepares for you and gives you a good old show. But, you know, the Six Nations is such a mad tournament. I think Eddie Jones referred to it somewhere. There's a quote to him saying, you don't get any time to build up. You're straight in. First match, England-France, probably the most important match of the whole thing. You're straight into it. You don't get build up. You don't get much recovery. It's not like you're the manager of a league team at 38 matches a season. Or 30.
Can I ask you a question? Because we've got the papers spread out here and Andy Farrell's face is in all of them, which is new for him. I know he's been part of it and he's high profile, but it's new for him to be the main focus, to have people teasing apart your psychology and talking about what you sang at your son's wedding and all that extra scrutiny. So you talked about liking to sleep on a decision the night before. That extra level of scrutiny and people debating your decisions. Did he get that wrong? He got that wrong. He got that right. That is a new thing for him to handle.
Yeah, and you've got to prepare for that. You've got to prepare your own methods to deal with that. Like I heard when I was at a coaching conference one time, a UEFA one, and the French coach, Mar, I think it was, he spoke about what he did before the World Cup.
Was it Mark Lièvremont?
No. And he said that he never read a newspaper for a month before the competition. And I went, right, that's an interesting one. I've
never believed a coach in any coach that said, I never read a newspaper. Do you?
I can tell you that a week before we played soccer matches when I was manager for Ireland, I didn't read a paper. I didn't see a sports page of a paper.
Never looked at them?
No, I didn't look at them. No.
Why? What was the exact
I didn't want to
rationale?
hear anyone's opinion that I felt, unless you're in it, you've no idea what it's like.
I get that.
Unless you're in it. Like, with all due respect to the lads who are spouting now who should play today and who has been poor so far this season, whether Cooney should play ahead of Murray and stuff like, I kind of go away with that. You haven't a clue. Try picking the team.
Hang on.
No. Just because you manage a team or coach a team at another level, it doesn't apply. And you don't need to take guidance or influence or anything from anything. That you are surrounded, you're in a bit of a bubble with people who know, and who really know, and they know the condition of the players, how well they are, what their mentality is, what the psychology is around the team. And they're the people you need to listen to and know about. So it is different. I'm sure, you know, he might be just a personality that says, I'll have a read of it and have a laugh about what, you know, Jerry Thornley might be saying, or Dave Kelly might be saying, the Independent. Maybe he's that sort of bloke. And good luck to him, whatever way he does it. But I don't think he can afford to spend too much time looking at that stuff and being affected by how the Irish people will see you as following on from Joe. The people he's working for, the IRFU, and the Irish people, the Irish rugby public will have a say, and they may moan and groan or they may cheer all along the way. It's ultimately the IRFU he works for, and so they're the people he needs to satisfy.
Because you always, we often play that line where you say, like, suddenly I had every plumber in Ireland telling me how to do my job, and I never
say that.
Yeah, and I never told a plumber how to do his job. However, the one subtle difference being, The plumber may have watched 5 or 10,000 soccer matches across his time, so he'd have a feel for players and good play. And so, like the lads in the paper, they'd be really on top of how lads are going to club and seeing them regularly. So.
Yeah, but I'm not dismissing their knowledge of the game.
Yes, I know that. No, you're saying you need to talk to the players day to day and not know the.
Yeah, but you need to be in there. You need to wonder. I respect.
There's a fairness in that comment. I mean, defending our colleagues as I would to the end, they're absolutely well versed. They understand their topic. They understand their sport. However, in any job, until you're sitting in the seat, whether that's your seat on a daily basis or the seat that I've sat in before, you hear people saying, it'd be easy if you did that. You never understand the pressures of a job or understand what goes on underneath the bonnet until you're actually sitting in that seat.
Just as well, trying to be a bit of a journalist, trying to do columns in the newspaper. I mean, I've had a go at that, and I found it only for the help of these experienced professional writers and columnists, I couldn't have got anything down.
I knew you weren't having a go at the journalists. You were making the point they couldn't possibly know stuff that you know behind the scenes because you're in it. That's totally fair. Did you ever, and you look back on it in hindsight, make any kind of a decision, team selection or way you might go about your business, even partly because of what you felt was public opinion, or there was a demand, you got to get him in the team, come on. Did that ever sway you a little bit? A little bit? Never, okay, good to know.
No, absolutely not. The things that swayed me, as you know, going back to managed Pat's opinions of my assistant Liam Buckley, Paul Nugent, people when I was at the senior team was Chris Houghton, Packy Bonner, Noel O'Reilly, people who had been in there. Well, I mean, in Packy's case and Chris, and had an awful lot of international caps on the belt. I had the experience of the pressure. They were the opinions that mattered to me in relation to selection.
Not the taxi driver saying, Brian, would you not stick him in the team?
No. Or not the journalists who were telling me the fellas were playing, a particular player might be playing very well in England. And I was going to England every week, seeing the players, and people were writing that they were playing very well. I'm at the matches going, God, I wish your man was with me that was saying so-and-so should be in the squad and should be playing. I wish he was with me today watching this. You know, so but I admire what the writing is brilliant. But what I find interesting is the debate about the role now for Farrell. What sort of a team are we going to be? Different? We're going to be better. I'm reading Ian McGeehan, and he starts his pieces. Ireland, very dangerous team. A lot of pundits to write them off based on their disappointment World Cup, but this is still effectively the same squad who won the Grand Slam in 2018. He finishes the piece. Ireland can do it with another dynamic ball carrier in the back row, but generally they are well stocked. The provinces are thriving, and Farrell has solid foundations on which to build. I think that's really nice. And then on Wales, he says there's certainly an expectation, the Welsh public, that Wales will open up a bit more under him. This is under the new coach, Wayne Pivac. So there's two teams, Ireland and Wales, that the expectation is we're going to open up a bit more and play differently. Are we going to win more? That's another question, because poor old Joe, is getting a bit of a kicking for the last good few months. But by God, did we win? And did we win regularly under Joe? Yeah. And let's see, when we open up, are we able to win as easily? Because it's not so easy to win when you open up. If you don't have the players.
In the main, absolutely. In the main, Ryle, everybody's tipping England to win this. They're the best team in the competition.
Yeah, and I think that's not a massive surprise. No. Everybody's going England, and the sense is that actually their biggest test may well be against France in the opening game. If they get over that hurdle, and we go back to that old word that all the coaches use and all the captains and all the players use, momentum, and then momentum. If they win week one, it's going to be very, very hard to stop them.
A slightly different piece, and by the way, you know, it's funny. There's the Ian McGeehan type things where they, you know, the verdict on every team, and it's quite bite-sized. I thought the profile of Fabian.
But that suited me, Joe.
I know
because
that.
I'm only, I'm
pretending he knows nothing again.
Fast learning for the slow learning.
He knows nothing again.
I'm being told I need to get to an ad break. But the profile piece on Mike Cadd is very good, and Fabian Galtay, they're both in the Mail, and they're really, really good. Might come to them in a second, but just to mention before I go to the ad break, and then we might finish up on the rugby briefly on the far side for a second. But Neil Francis is talking about the future for the tournament. Do I have time here? No. I'm being screamed at. Definitely have to go. Okay, I'll be in trouble. Okay, I'm going to take a short ad break. We'll go to Ryan O'Dwyer on the far side, and then we're back. We'll finish off in the rugby and then talk FAI before we let the lads go. Now, back to the papers. We have Brian Kerr and Ryle Nugent. We're looking through what's on offer. Just to round up the Six Nations offering, I knew we wouldn't get to even half of the stuff there. But Neil Francis is just making a point about the future of the competition. It's probably one of those things which will really be a factor in the coming years, Ryle. But he said that last week the Competition Consumer Protection Commission gave 27% CVC the right to buy 27% in the Pro 14 for 120 million, which means, as Neil Francis says, 40 large for the IRFU. And now CVC has tabled a bid for 15% of the Six Nations Championship for 300 million. This values the competition at 3 billion. He says, while the numbers are really impressive, I don't really understand where is this going. As Groucho Marx once said, a child of 5 could understand this. Could somebody please send for a child of 5? Apart from the money, what is the benefit, he wonders, of selling the crown jewels and the golden goose to a bunch of asset strippers and cold-blooded profiteers? That's the CVC he's talking about there. The CVC will get 15% of all profits. He says, where to next? I'm presuming the CVC will take over the commercial rights of the Six Nations. They'll ratchet up TV rights to pay-per-view to add as much value as they can. And then he concludes the piece by basically saying, all the wrong type of people are lining up to sell the Six Nations to the wrong type of people. World Rugby, the Neville Chamberlains of the game, barely raise their hands to say, I say, old bean, what's going on here? He says this is bad business because no one will have a clue what these people will do with the Six Nations in 5 to 10 years. It's a bad idea because unions don't really need the money. It's a bad idea because it smacks of short-term vision. It's a bad idea because what works for American sport or American commercial interests may not and probably will not work here. This is a bad idea.
Yeah, it's a very strong piece from Neil, and he has consistently written on the
running of the game,
running of the game, and the funding of the game. And I think what, on a broader point, I think where Neil's going is where lots of people that are involved in the game are concerned, like where and what will be the financial model, and where will it leave the game 3, 5, 7, 10 years from now. And look, CVC have been involved and taken a stakehold in the Gallagher Premiership in the UK. They are now involved in the Pro 14. There is a sense that they will be involved in the Six Nations. What does that mean if those are all under their control to something like the Champions Cup? Where is the game going to be funded? Like, I think what needs to be remembered here is that rugby union is not soccer, and it is not an American sport. And I think that point is really well made. It is still, and will continue to be, on the margins. So when things are going well for rugby union, particularly in a country like Ireland, of course there'll be an engagement, and of course there'll be it'll have that halo impact. But when it's not going well, we've seen, we've seen this time and time again through numerous sports. We are a bandwagon jumping kind of sports culture. We like to see the winners, and when things aren't going so well, we can turn left or right of the sport that we enjoyed 3 or 5 years previously. I think Neil's point on where the funding is going to come from and what the impact of that funding is well made, and it is still a game very much on the margins. And if the right decisions aren't made, and if the money doesn't come from the right places, then there are questions about where it's going to be 3, 5, 7 years down the road. We've seen what's happened in Saracens in the last couple of weeks. What happens if funding is, that they were living beyond their means, and the impact of that is now very clear, and what it's going to mean to them and to their supporters. Where rugby union goes, because it has a desire to keep feeding the beast, which is bringing the best players in, making sure they get paid at a certain level, that the clubs are able to have a professional structure that continues to allow them to develop and the game to develop. But there are consequences of that. And there is a sense that rugby union is in, and rightly so, is on uneven ground at the moment, because there is no concrete foundation as to where it is going over the next. There is no very clear vision where everybody's on the same page saying this is where we're going. And on a sport that's relatively peripheral and relatively small by comparison to soccer, for example, that's a worry. And one bad mistake and the whole thing can come tumbling down. And I understand the concerns of it, because we look at the media rights and you say, well, how are they going to increase? The only way that the media rights are going to increase is by putting them behind the paywall in the context of the Six Nations. If you do that and you take the Six Nations off free-to-air television that is available to the vast majority or everybody in this country and in the UK and in France, you do that, the game will disappear. It won't disappear overnight, but it'll disappear 3, 5, 7 years down the road. We've seen what's happened with cricket. And if you make the wrong decision and allow that to become the financial, the requirement to have the most money now becomes the decision-making process, then you're on a very slippy road. And I think that's the crux of Neil's point, and I don't know enough about the CVC thing to make a valued decision.
Yeah.
But there are concerns about how the game is going to be funded going forward, and Neil's right to draw attention to it.
Any last piece in the rugby catch your eye that you want to direct people towards before we leave
I think, look, you pick up a newspaper, you get it. There is great coverage. Brendan Fanning's done some super stuff in the Indo, as we said. There's former players and coaches aplenty. It depends on what way you want to go. Okay.
Brian Kerr, the FAI. Tommy Conlon here on page 9 of the Sunday Independent says Quinn will need to park the corporate schmoozer image to succeed. He talks about Niall Quinn's appointment. He's interim deputy CEO. Gary Owens is the interim CEO, formally unveiled to the public last Monday. Together with their chum Roy Barrett, he says, the FAI chairman appointed earlier this month, they will become the 3 degrees in suits.
I think the first line is better though. The unexpected takeover of the FAI by Interim Milan continues the pace with Niall Quinn,
very good.
the big money signing. The Longfellow has been brought in to fulfil a new look role of interim deputy CEO. It's a very amusing piece by Tommy, and in his own inimitable style. It's very good. I don't agree with his finish up. It means what Niall has to do. It means not pandering to the fans and grassroots. It means dishing out the tough medicine if he has to. It also means that he is their ambassador in the offices where important discussions are imminent. I don't see that needs to be said. Niall didn't work as CEO of Sunderland and be nice to everyone every day, or not be able to make some tough decisions around the daily management of that club in the role he had. So I don't think people should underestimate his ability to make decisions, and strong decisions. He's been involved in various businesses. He's still involved in a business, as I understand it. And I'm sure he has to make awkward decisions and tell people tough things at times. But I think that it is very important. But I like that reference to the 3 degrees. But what I would say, in fairness, together with their chum Roy Barrett, the FAI chairman appointed earlier this month, I think it's fair to say that they weren't chums until fairly recently. Roy Barrett, who is the CEO of Goodbody, I don't think Niall would have known Roy Barrett more than until I think that they had a reunion of the Jack Charlton era teams. A couple of, it's only about a year and a half ago. Until then, I don't think he knew Roy Barrett at all. Gary Owens, he wouldn't have known until he did an interview with Lord Rester, Marion Finucane on RTE on Saturday morning, and not too long ago, and Gary Owens contacted him after that and told him he liked what he was talking about and liked to help. That's how recent those friendships are. I would also say, interestingly, what Tommy says about he will play alongside Gary Owens, the interim CEO, who was formally unveiled to the public only last Monday. That's an interesting idea, because Gary Owens was a very good centre forward in the Leinster Senior League with St. Joseph's. I remember him playing. I remember meeting him on a coaching course many, many years ago, and I kind of followed his progress as a player. And I remember actually assessing him at one time and said, would he be good enough for us, for Pats? And I took the view he wasn't quite good enough, but he was a very good centre forward. He played with Fairview Shankill, I think, a bit after that. Obviously, he was in the corporate world. He was the CEO of Hibernian Insurance when I next came across him. So he has a good football background. Roy Barrett played a bit in schools, played in Blackrock, and played in UCD and so on. So they are football people, interested in football, always had a love of football. But I think it's their commercial and business lives that many people feel comfort that they have now become involved in the FAI, along with the other independent directors. and Niall has taken on a role now which is not absolutely clear what he's going to do. But I think it's all good. I think it badly needed that type of shake-up and interesting characters that people can have a trust in, that they won't be interested in their own welfare, that they won't be promoting themselves and ensuring their own progress through the ranks of UEFA or whatever. And they'd be interested in changing the image of the game, but also improving. I mean, the situation they're in at the moment, where a couple of weeks, just a week before Christmas, we were talking about possible receivership and liquidation, and the minister referred to it as a basket case at one stage. We're a bit past that, but you still have to get that deal done. That's the most important thing.
It's Shane McGrath's comment on it on page 72 of the Mail on Sundays. Niall Quinn's FAI appointment is a good news story, and one presumes that's precisely why it was made. And then down at the end he says, Quinn is a positive, well-liked force, and he is nothing like the departed leadership of Irish soccer. That matters. And I absolutely understand why Niall Quinn has been brought in there. I don't know Niall in a business sense. I haven't come across him having to deal with him in the commercial sense of the word, but what I have is come across him in a social in a social role, and he's great with people, and he genuinely is. And I think that actually is a very undervalued trait when it comes to a big organisation with lots of component parts and lots of stakeholders. Somebody who can walk into a room and actually deal with everybody on a level playing field, where people feel someone who's in a leadership role will listen to them, will talk to them, will hear what they have to say, will when required give them a yes or a no. That counts for an enormous amount. And I think Niall, from what I know of him, is a very personable fella and will bring that. And if he brings nothing else, that ability to go into a room and make people feel valued, wanted, needed and encouraged is something that the FAI desperately need right now.
And the staff.
That's the point I'm making, particularly on the staff side of it, and also on the outside stakeholders part of it. The business element of the organisation, the full-time appointment of a CEO can't come quickly enough, and everybody is aware of that. That's not a reflection on the people that have been put in on an interim basis. Some of them may stay on a full-time basis, maybe they won't. But the lack of decisiveness in being able to do that, and I understand all the reasons why it hasn't been done yet. It just needs to happen, and it needs to happen quickly. And just to go back on something that Brian said, I think in that decision-making process, whoever the new CEO becomes on a non-interim Milan basis, this language that's used around it being, and I'm not saying that you've said it, Brian, but it has been said on numerous occasions that a football person, a football man is required. And on two levels, I have an issue with that. I think the word man should be taken out of it, because on basis of what we've seen so far, one of the best sports administrators in the country is not a man. And the second thing I'd say is that it definitely needs to be somebody clearly with a sports industry background, but it doesn't necessarily, and in fact it might be an advantage if that person wasn't from a football background. But whatever the outcome is, I can see how Niall Quinn can supplement that role if he ends up staying on a longer term basis, and how that might work. In the short term, he will definitely do a job on the people part of it, and on the people part of it, like I was asking Brian, it's 200 odd people we're talking about on a day-to-day basis who must feel absolutely ground down to the ground and ground, you know.
Oh, morale there has been.
And I've dealt with the FAI for many, many years, and there are some incredibly good and capable people there that have somehow been totally boxed off, kept out, not allowed to perform or reform in a way that they felt was needed and required. And I've no doubt said out loud. And now we are where we are. So hopefully Niall's appointment gives some solace to them in terms of being heard, and the quicker we get to a point where there's a new CEO. I think what has to be said, and I'll stop after this, I think on that CEO role, I think anybody who's expecting a quick fix here, or a sense that this is all going to get better when Joe Molloy or whoever that is appointed as the new CEO, needs to take a big step back and reevaluate. This is not going to be a quick fix. This isn't going to be a 1-year fix or a 2-year fix. It's got to be a 3 to 5 to 7 year strategical fix where somebody is given the tools and the support from the entire organisation to say, this is where we need to get to. There's going to be a lot of pain along the way. There are going to be some horribly tough decisions along the way, but we are going to get there. And to bring, and that's the communication part of it, and the leadership part of it, and you bring everybody to that place. But I have a sense, even in reading the stuff that I'm reading and listening to people still within the organisation, that they expect that there's going to be some sort of silver bullet here. And I don't think the evidence is there to suggest that it will.
In the short term, Ryle, I always felt if there was a few decent appointments early on, that the mood could change. There'll be a bit more confidence from people, from the government obviously, and from people in the business and commercial world, that there are people of merit at the top of the trying to run the organisation properly. There's been, I think a lot has gone on, and I think the work of Paul Cook and the new directors that come in after the AGM and Trim shouldn't be overlooked.
No,
they're still there. Paul, inherited a very messy situation, and they've done well to stabilise things. I think the next stage of it's happening now with the new directors and the independent directors, Catherine Goy and Liz Joyce. Roy Barrett, obviously their own reputations and where they come from, they're leaving themselves open a little bit. So fair play to their bravery and their courage and their interest in the game that they're prepared to do this. I think those appointments, along with Niall saying he's prepared to work and have a role and do particular jobs, I think that gives a face to it that people say, yeah, I think that's very encouraging. And I think the election of, I have to come out straight, and my friend Jerry McInerney got elected as president yesterday in a straight vote between himself and Martin Herity, and he won convincingly, and I'm very pleased for him because he's had a long outstanding career, both his career in the army, but as a football bloke, he played schoolboy football, played schoolboy international. In a time when we didn't have too many schoolboy internationals, played in the League of Ireland, played Munster Senior League, played a lot of junior football in Cork and coached the clubs, all that, and then he served his time as a legislator. And he is now, but he will handle the position well, and he will add another layer of common sense, I think, and sharpness, I think, to the role for the next 6 months he's in. And these things are all good things in a short space of time. Obviously, we need the permanent role of the CEO to be filled. Mm-hmm. But let's see how that develops. But the next thing, having done that, I always felt there would be a lot more hope around the game if these type of things happened. And the next best thing that could happen would be that the senior international team wins the two matches, and none of these people can control that. Mick McCarthy is in charge and will be doing his very best. If that could be achieved and we are in the finals in with some matches in Dublin, that'd be a great little start. I agree that there's a long-term job to be done. There's huge work. Huge change to the culture has to take place within the organisation, because the previous culture ensured the sort of things that happened that Ryle mentioned there, that good people were suppressed, their views were suppressed, their ability was suppressed, and they were discriminated against in certain ways if they knew certain people outside the organisation. Also, a lot of very good people were discarded and moved on because maybe they challenged that authority. And we know some of this, but it was much deeper than a lot of people have heard about. And that type of culture has to change. And some of the implementers of that culture will either have to change or move on. I think some of that has already taken place up there. So
it's interesting, Jerry McEnany's opening line. Asked what he could offer, McEnany said, communication is the key. You have to let people know where we are. We have to keep everybody informed. For me, it's about getting out and spreading the gospel of the FAI. I'm with them on all of that, and I understand the sentiment behind the gospel of the FAI. I think what has to be clear is that gospel now needs to become clear. What is the strategy? What is the message that we have got to send to our constituents, to our partners? I think what people forget here is that the FAI has so many stakeholders. It's got UEFA and FIFA at an arm's length. It's got its commercial partners, its media partners. It's got its own league. It's got its own staff. It's got grassroots. I mean, that is...
It's about 300,000 people who play football every week.
It's a spaghetti junction of stakeholders, and trying to get a very clear strategy in line for all of those stakeholders is going to be incredibly difficult, because the financial requirement is going to mean you're going to be able to give in some areas and not give in others, and you're going to have to prioritise and not in others. So, look, it is going to be baby steps and then big steps, and we're at the baby step stage, Brian. Wouldn't you agree? We're at the baby step stage of turning around.
They've been important baby steps.
But of course they are. Baby steps are very important.
They've been bigger steps than the organisation has ever taken before.
Well, I'm not questioning that.
No. But listen, they talked about the Genesis report in its time back around 2002, 2003. I was technical director at the time, and the author of the Genesis report didn't even approach me to speak to me, even though I was the technical director of the organisation. I had to fight to get my voice heard. So the Genesis report to me was a bit of a makey-uppy thing that didn't really cover strategy properly or what needed to be done at that time. The organisation floundered. Financially, as I've said earlier, it's almost bankrupt. We need to come back from that. Meanwhile, the games continue on. Meanwhile, the international teams play. Meanwhile, the League of Ireland is about to start in a couple of weeks, and there's an issue about the referees not having the resources to be in the condition they should be for the start of the league. But these steps that have been taken are going to give an awful lot of people confidence that the regime change that was required years and years ago, and the leadership required to inspire people and to make those good people in the staff to reignite their fire to doing their job to their best ability, because over the last 14 years they have been crumbling under the culture that has been imposed up there.
How quickly can we get to a point where there are very, very good academies at various League of Ireland clubs and the league is vibrant? And when I say vibrant, I mean good crowds of between 5,000 and 10,000 at most games. They understand it's not the Premier League, the fans, but they enjoy the live football experience, and the stadiums are improved, and the football on offer is
well, that's
good.
Not going to happen quickly, and I've got...
That's we're back to my 5, 7, 10 year
exactly.
plan. You can't flick your fingers and say that the League of Ireland is going to be
much better next year.
People have a hope it will, but it's
Joe, I look at
the point I'm making. I think people need to step back and take a reality check here. Just because something has been played out and found out and laid bare doesn't mean you can fix it overnight. And it's not going to be fixed overnight. What you need is to put somebody and a group of people and an entire organisation in that says, this is I don't know an organisation that's successful that doesn't say, this is where we're going. As a CEO, that's your job. This is where we're going, and I'm going to bring all of you with me. And we're going to get there. And there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, but we're going to get there. But what we need is to hear where that is. And there are going to be some large difficulties in the way. But asking, is the league going to be able to... You can't... There are huge decisions to be made.
And Joe, I have to show me hand on this one. I've been working, busily with Kieran Lucid and a few other people towards the All-Ireland League idea. And this week is a very important week in that there's 3 days of stakeholders meetings in Belfast, Dublin and Cork. The FAI will be involved, and the IFA, despite the fact that they've come out against it. I think that has a real opportunity to change standards in football in Ireland, in the leagues both north and south, in an amalgamated league, and that's why I believe it, and that's why I've been helping out. But even if that doesn't go ahead, it's still going to take some years to change the sort of things you talk about. Investment in our stadiums, where's the money going to come from that? It badly needs done. Investment in the academy, that badly needs to happen as well. Having another look at the underage structure. Why are we playing the under 13 National League, the whole country, 15, 17, 19? Having another look at that seriously needs to be done. But there is a lot of potential there. There's good people out there, and now I believe there are good people at the top of the organisation. Whether some of them are interim or not, I hope that either that they will stay for a lot longer, or people as good as them come to the table after the 6 months' time. But I think these initial steps are positive, and will be seen that way by people that matter, that have money, that contribute, that can be new sponsors. There's a lot of doom and gloom about the loss of some of the sponsors. I think that can be fixed.
Okay. Leave the FAI for now.
Whatever you say, Joe.
We're not going to have time to get through everything we have to touch on. I mean, I had jotted down some Ole Gunnar Solskjaer pieces, and there's some good ones.
Yeah.
United are 3-0 up, I should tell you, and he worried Manchester United fans after 32 minutes.
Give him a new contract. Give him a new...
Sign him up.
Give him a statue.
So, like, that's a lot of the same talk about Solskjaer that there has been. And then there's a Kenneth Egan interview with Mark Gallagher, which is quite good as well. What do you lads want to finish on? We can finish on either.
There's also...
I like the Kenny Egan.
Right, well, you start turning
I like
to Kenneth
the
Egan.
Kenny Egan piece.
Ryle, what were you saying?
Yeah, I think
The AFL.
Yeah, there's a good piece in the Sunday Times.
Yeah, Michael Foley.
Michael Foley, page 6 of the Sunday Times, which is this. It's in light. It piqued my interest in light of the comments that Mickey Hart and others made about the number of players going in the men's game over to Australia, and whether the GA should be engaged and how they should be engaged and compensate. I mean,
Should they play those couple of matches every couple of years with
and
the Australian? What's that game they play? I'm not sure what it's called.
Rules.
Oh yeah, I heard someone describing it the bastardised rules. So I don't know what
Better name for it, Brian.
I don't know what, because I don't know what that game is really, you know. But
well, Michael Foley has an interview with a guy called Jason Hill from Surrey, who has gained the odd reputation among a cluster of Irish co-workers as the foremost authority on ladies Gaelic football. That's how the opening paragraph plays out, and it's about his agency, Jason Hill's agency, and the number of female players now going to play in the AFL women's season, which dovetails, and I'm quoting perfectly, with the Ladies Football Championship running from early February to April. Last year, 5 Irish players took part in the AFLW season. This year, the number has jumped to 18. And the question is, what happens if this drip becomes a flow, becomes a significant, to a point where as now on the flip side, as the article says, last week Dublin manager Mick Bowen wondered what happens to ladies football if the AFLW season expands. Mayo manager Pat Leahy questioned the impact on the National League that begins this weekend. Mayo alone have lost 4 of their starting 6 forwards from last year's All-Ireland semi-final. Does it damage the league's commercial value and the competition when 18 players from a dozen counties go missing?
Yeah.
And where does it go? And it goes on. It's an interesting piece, and it's timely in light of the comments that have been made about the men's.
Yeah, no, it is, because those numbers aren't quite a flood, but they're a bit more than a drip as well.
Well, we've gone beyond a drip.
Yeah.
You've gone from, and we're only in year 2, so it's going to be interesting, and there's an interesting mark about the women's AFL is a terrible game. It's shocking. Sarah Rowe, that is, did not come back a better footballer. She's gone out this year with the Gaelic football to train at all times with it, according to her manager. So
it's partly Joe's fault for bringing in Cora Staunton here to talk about how good it was.
Yeah, she had a great time. She's doing great. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you go?
I was just about to make that point. I mean, I have absolute sympathy and understanding from the manager's perspective that they don't want to lose their players. But when you're talking about young athletes, young female athletes in this instance, with the potential to go away and have both an experience abroad in a place like Australia, and actually to earn a couple of quid from it, and to where or why would you say no to that, other than if you were a coach who's trying to put together a team and a county team? It's interesting, the connection to the commercial value of it, and what does that say about the potential growth of the national leagues here, and if they were to expand the Australian rules into a longer season or change the season, because it's still in its infancy, if they were to stay with it but change it, and you were to lose a load of players over there, how much damage might it actually do here to the women's game, which is clearly growing in strength every year.
And the more girls that go and have a good time and earn a few quid, the more they're going to pass on that word. So, you know, it'll be a difficult one to stop. To stop that drain of players.
Kenneth Egan then is doing a sit-down interview with Mark Gallagher in the Mail on Sunday. He's coaching Eric Donovan, as you might have seen, and Eric, who's a great fella, as I'm sure you all know at this stage, has a big fight in Belfast next Saturday against the Spanish fighter Christian Montilla. So Kenneth Egan's talking about that, saying it's a make or break fight for Eric Donovan. As for where he is generally, he says he's in a great place. He is a local counsellor, he is a psychotherapist, he is a boxing coach, and he was just harking back to the fact that he'll be 10 years sober this August. An achievement, writes Mark Gallagher, he considers far greater than anything he did in the ring. And he says he remembers being in Boomer's bar and was worried about sitting there in 10 years' time, nudging young fellas, showing them photos of himself with an Olympic medal, saying, "Can you buy me a drink?" He said, "It's scary, but that's where drinking would have left me." He says, "If I hadn't won the medal, it would have been a slow, steady demise with my drinking, but I got sober at 28. I was very lucky. When I go to AA now, I see the destruction drink causes. Men in their 50s and 60s with nothing, kids not talking to them. I don't wake up every morning and think of drinking, but I do think of it. The most important thing in my life now is my sobriety. I have a 4-year-old daughter who I love dearly, but she is not more important than this, because if that's gone, then she is gone. Wife, house, kids are all gone, so I treat my sobriety as my golden egg. Without it, I'd have nothing." So he's in a great place and he's come through a lot.
Yeah, that was the piece I thought was most important in it all. I don't wake up every morning and think of it, but I do think of it. The most important thing is my sobriety. I liked the bit where he's talking about the afters of boxing, and he said, he's talking about young boxers and what happens after them. I was blinkered in my career. All I wanted to do was get to the Olympics. Nothing else mattered. When I talk to boxers now, I ask them, "What does retirement look like to you?" They look at me like I've two heads. But that's the question they need to answer. When they retire, they won't all be Olympic medalists or Olympians. So what will they be when they stop punching? That needs to be embedded in their heads. There are plenty of online courses out there, and you've loads of time when you're in the high performance program. You've only 4 hours a day. So, he's making the point that has been made in so many sports, has been made frequently about young football players. They come back from England, they haven't stayed with their education, and he's making the case for them, for the people who are running these programs to ensure that their educational side is taken care of. Like, one other bit on this, I stepped away from the sport and had no identity. I can't walk into Bank of Ireland with my silver medal and ask for a mortgage. They'd laugh you out the door. That was frightening. I was 30 years of age, still living in my mum's house with an Olympic medal in my back pocket, but that was it.
Get that line.
So I just think that there's the essence of the responsibility of people at nearly any level of sport, that where you've got to prepare kids and you're trying to improve them, or adults, and you're trying to improve them, and the importance of the game and the importance of improving themselves and be better players and being better competitors. The other side of it, you've got to prepare them for that as well. You've a responsibility to see that they understand that not everybody gets gold medals or winning medals or wins all. You've got, but then, there's a couple of other bits that I thought were fascinating. He's talking about when he was a boxer. He's talking about Zor, the coach, right? Zor Anita, the technical genius on the floor when he came to work with him. I didn't know how to box before he turned up, even though I was 22 and had won 3 senior titles. In those 4 years, he sharpened me up to the extent where I was standing on the Olympic podium. Imagine that, admitting that you're 22, having won all the All-Ireland titles you would have on the way up through the system, and won 3, and then a fella comes along and says, "I thought I was 8 out of 10 because I was winning a few international tournaments around Europe. Zor told me, no, you're a 2 out of 10, but I'll make you an 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
Isn't that brilliant? The ability of a coach to improve an individual. And the other interesting aspect that I like about this, he's talking about his time in Clondalk, and I love the area. I've been all over the world 10 times in every continent, but I love Clondalk and the people in this area. I know it gets bad publicity sometimes, but they're really good people. I got a house 200 yards from my mum, so the Bank of Ireland must have given him something for his Olympic medal, and that is why I got into local politics, because I think I'll make a change for the better in the area. I think that's lovely, and I love the bit where at the top, there's a picture of him playing cricket, and he's talking about helping to set up a cricket club in Clontarkin because of the number of kids from Indian, Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities.
Not just
who
set
all
it up,
love
he's
cricket.
chairman of the
He's the
Clontarkin
chairman of the
Cricket
club.
Club.
And he moved them over to Tymon Park because there was already a team playing in Corkig Park. There were already a club from Lucan House who were playing in Cork. And I know where the patch is. In fairness to South Dublin County Council, they put a wicket in over in Tymon Park, and I walk by it most days. But I didn't know who the home team was. So now I know who the home team was. I'd be expecting to see Kenny on the line saying, "Come on, give her a lash, you know, give her a bash, go for a 6, go for a 4." So I think there's sport.
Yeah.
There's him. Only the Olympic boxer, but here we've got all these different aspects of him. The counsellor, the counsellor, as in the political counsellor, the counsellor to individuals and people, the coach to Eric Donovan,
Family
the
man,
chairman,
dad,
the
chairman,
family man,
yeah.
the chairman, and he's saying that this has happened because he got himself sober, and he's saying sober. Is it
10 years ago this year.
And it wasn't going to happen unless he got it. You know?
Yeah.
So
no, it's a great
isn't that
piece,
much
yeah.
more admirable than winning the Olympic medal?
Yeah.
Although we all cheered all the way, and Olympic year is here.
I have kept you both far too long, so we'll wrap things up. Thanks so much for coming in, Ryle Nugent and Brian Kerr. Fellas, thanks again. Appreciate it. We'll do it again sometime.
Thanks, Joe.
We'll take a short break. Back with the latest from Nolan Park.
Off the ball on News Talk.
Think you've got what it takes to become one of the showcase